Welcome to It Starts With Mom. If you know, you know. And we know that every day March of Dimes fights for the health of all moms and babies. Today, we're talking about what you need to know before you get pregnant. I'm Stacey Skrysak. I'm a TV journalist, a writer, a motivational speaker, but most importantly, I'm mom, and that's my proudest role. I'm a parent to a 22-weeker surviving triplet, a micro preemie mom, as well as a rainbow baby that's now a Spitfire 3-year-old. So I'm so excited to be here with you today. It's wonderful to be joining together with other moms. All moms, we're working moms. And we all try to balance work and life and babies and doing the best for our kids. So often, our own needs, they're getting deprioritized, and it's not okay. Moms need a community to lean on, people to turn to who will listen and support us. And we can't do it alone, and we shouldn't have to. So, March of Dimes, they're there for women at every stage of motherhood, even when things don't go according to plan. It starts with mom. It's a great resource for moms and moms to be and their families to help them get along the way through pregnancy and then beyond. There's so much that we want to help you and things that you might need to know, but it's impossible to know everything. And that's why we need to lean on each other. And like they say, if you know, you know. And we know that to have healthy babies and families and communities, it all starts with mom. Speaking of what you need to know, we're looking forward to this first fireside chat with Olympic medalist and New York Times bestselling author Shawn Johnson East and Dr. Elizabeth Cherot. She's Senior Vice President and Chief Medical and Health Officer. She leads the March of Dimes Office of Maternal and Child Health Impact. So we're going to be talking about what's important to know as you begin your motherhood journey. Before you become pregnant, it's important to be aware of those chronic health conditions so that you're prepared as possible for a healthy pregnancy and to be sure that you take care of your mental health as well. We're going to talk about motherhood journeys and what we wish we knew way back then when we were starting those journeys. So this is a first of 3-part series focusing on putting moms first. Join us for our other episodes on May 25th when we tackle being pregnant, and on June 8th when we talk about post-pregnancy. I'm so excited to get this conversation started. So let's get started because no matter what today brings, it starts with mom.
Sometimes in our lives, we all have pain. We all have sorrow. Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on.
Well, having a healthy baby starts before you actually get pregnant. And I'm so excited to be joined by two amazing people. Dr. Elizabeth Cherot with March of Dimes. She's the Senior Vice President and Chief Medical and Health Officer. And we've been actually fangirling a little bit. Can I say that? With Shawn Johnson East. I mean, everyone knows her. She is Olympic gold medalist. She's a mom. She's a best-selling author. And I think you also have a mirror ball trophy, don't you?
I do.
I mean, a lot of us are, Dancing with the Stars fans too. So,
Well, thank you.
all right. Well, we want to get this conversation started. And having a baby, it starts, in the talking phases before that, planning phases. And let's start with you, Shawn. Why don't you tell me a little bit about the start of motherhood for you? And, was this something you and your husband, you started talking about?
Yes and no. Our kind of parenting journey was an interesting story, I guess. We accidentally got pregnant, and yes, we know how it all works, but we just weren't planning it yet. Um, and it kind of changed for us overnight. We had to have all of those conversations very quickly. And we very quickly found out that those conversations are very important, making sure you're both on the same page, making sure you're financially prepared and you're prepared within your careers and your businesses and ready to take on being a mom and a dad, and having a little one running around. For us, though, it was a little bit different because we ended up losing that pregnancy. And my whole journey with momhood just kind of skyrocketed because I've never felt that kind of a loss before, and it still sticks with me today. And it was a major learning curve, and I felt like I learned so much in such a short period of time. And that kind of sparked so many different conversations moving into the next pregnancy and then having our daughter and our son. But yeah, I feel like so much goes into it that you would never think of.
And we're going to come back to that because you've been a big advocate and an inspiration for a lot of people. Dr. Cherot, I think that's something that we should talk about. You're also a mother as well. When we talk about getting pregnant and thinking, you want to plan, Shawn mentioned, the financial part of it, but then there's also the health part of it. You talk to a lot of moms being an OBGYN. What kind of advice do you give? And I guess a two-part question. Do you also, practice what you preach?
Well,
Easier said than done.
let's start with the easy part, which is being a doctor.
Yeah.
I would say these are conversations that absolutely, if you can have the conversation before you conceive, super important. Getting that diabetes, that hypertension, all under control, or any other chronic health condition. But it's also about prevention. So things like avoiding alcohol and tobacco, those are, one of the still commonly used prior to conceiving or once you have conceived. So to really, think about getting rid of all of that immediately and getting on folic acid. But those are conversations that if you can have before you conceive, excellent. I think it's also, Shawn, the excitement or the, elation of getting pregnant and then the idea of a loss or that if something may go wrong. So it is a little bit of a roller coaster ride. And I think emotionally for a lot of people, it is an emotional roller. It all of a sudden becomes an amazing idea of a responsibility, though you hope 9 months later, but that those things are a lot to take on, especially in today's day. It just, the anxiety, depression, those are other things to really want to get under control as well.
Stacey, I actually was going to add to going through that whole first pregnancy is the first time that I felt like I needed to have a really strong connection with my OBGYN. I feel like up until that point, it was kind of like, you don't really talk. And after that, I was like, we need to be best friends. I need to have your cell phone number. I need to be able to ask you all of these questions now. And that changed the game for us as well.
I think
Yeah.
that's so important. That's such a good topic. I'm sure you add to it.
Yeah, I think the pivot there is, you come in, you're getting maybe an annual exam or a conversation about contraception or a urinary tract infection, something along those lines. But now all of a sudden you're saying, okay, I need to trust you to be able to deliver my baby. And it's, and what hospital are you in? What are you, how do you practice? What do you, and really feeling like there's trust with your provider, especially today is hard. Trustworthiness is really difficult. And I do think that conversation pivots from, a casual conversation to some in-depth conversation that happens. And it's hard to get to know the patient in that little annual visit or in that very short problem visit. Now it's, you hopefully get to know each other pretty quickly before those 9 months.
That was our case because for myself, we went through years of infertility. So we went through the fertility doctor and then got the shock of our lives pregnant with triplets. So it was just this extremely quick and very close-knit community that I became, close with, is the high-risk doctors, the OBGYN that I did have, Shawn, on speed dial on my cell phone because I needed that, that reassurance. And I think that advocating for yourself and your child, and also before you get pregnant, though, I think we should talk about some of maybe the health things. I know, Shawn, you were, at the epitome of good health when it comes to athleticism. Did you have any other trouble getting pregnant? Was that, I know for some people, the pre stuff, that it's tough.
I felt like before I ever got to the part of like trying to get pregnant again, I had so many conversations with nutritionists and psychologists and therapists because I did have a history of eating disorders, of severe anemia. And after having the miscarriage in my head, I know my OBGYN reassured me that it was not any of that. But in my head, I felt like it could have been. So I kind of sought out a lot of help to make sure my body was prepared to give it the best shot possible. I tried to have the most moderate lifestyle in a healthy way and just mentally prepare for that. But I think with our daughter, it took about a year. And my son, we got very lucky. It happened quickly. But
And Dr. Cherot, I think that you could add to this that every person is different. And I think that's what's frustrating, especially in this day and age of, social media. So when I was going through infertility treatments, and this was 10 years ago, I was looking at Facebook going, "Oh my gosh, there's another pregnancy announcement. Why isn't it working for me?" And the statistics are out there. It is tough to
Yeah.
conceive right away, and even though while it might seem like it's easy, it may not be. So, what are some of those? What's your advice to those
Yeah.
parents?
Yeah, you're bringing up a really, I talk to a lot of patients about this who, it is that roller coaster ride of, first of all, wanting to prevent pregnancy for so long and then pivoting to try and conceive, or Shawn, in your case, right, having a loss and then processing of like, actually, this is something I want, or, that I may not have planned for. The blame part when you do miscarriage is huge. I think a lot of women want to know the why. And we don't have a lot of whys. We have some information, usually, a large percentage, maybe a genetic issue that you can't predict or that you can't necessarily prevent. And that not every pregnancy is healthy from the beginning. So miscarriage does happen. And then realizing that process happens and that, getting ready for the next one is something you can start to work and look forward to. But it becomes an emotional roller coaster, especially if you add in infertility, especially if you add in age, right? It just gets harder and harder to conceive as you get older. And I think those are real. And I think it's having those conversations, those shared conversations are super helpful. I think having a lot of therapists or having lots of conversations with a provider, whether it's a midwife, whether it's a community person, a doula, there are so many that being honest and open about, all of a sudden you get your period and you were hoping that it was this time you were going to be pregnant, and that huge roller coaster of emotion can hit you more than you expect. And so those are really real. And I think the conversation about loss and miscarriage and even infertility doesn't happen honestly. We haven't really talked about it a lot. I would say in the last few years, it's probably more women are speaking out, which I think is really important. But that roller coaster ride of emotions, it can hit women overwhelmingly so. And I think especially when someone maybe your own age or your peer or family member is pregnant at the same time, I think that can be really difficult to watch somebody you care for and then you're resentful maybe of them, or feeling like, why not me? All of those things, all those emotions are real. It's a lot of conversations that need to be had, and being honest with them, those
And I
feelings.
think that some of the emotions and the anxiety and the stress that can also, I assume, take a toll on, your being able to conceive. Is that
Fertility.
correct?
Yeah, no, absolutely. We really talk about stress impacting it quite a bit, just as it can change your cycles, how stressed out you are, whether that's physically, it's emotionally too. And so that has a huge impact. I can tell you medical school was a little bit stressful. I don't remember having any kind of cycles that were cycles. And I think about that in so many ways. If you start to conceive and then you're or trying to conceive, and the stress of that, and the performance anxiety, there's so on the male part, right, there's so much that gets entangled in all of that, that it absolutely impacts your ability to ovulate. There's no question there. Yeah, I think that's something that women should really realize. So how do you just say, hey, relax? It doesn't work that way. There's a lot that needs to get done. Yeah.
Yes, I think Sean's nodding her head as well. I actually, after we went years of infertility, we went through our pregnancy and went through the loss of two of our children, two of our triplets. I never was going to have children again, and then I suddenly became pregnant. And we remember talking to our fertility doctor. This was 6 years after we had our triplets, and I said, "How did this happen? I couldn't have kids. Like, we actually had a reason. We knew why I couldn't." And he said, "You know what? The stress," he's like, "strange things happen." But he said, "A lot of times when you let go, of that stress and the anxiety, and you kind of find peace with yourself, or you move on to something else, then maybe you never know, it might happen." And Shawn, I want to go back to you. We were talking mental health, and I think that this is really important. In 2017, you so bravely, you and your husband Andrew, so bravely shared your loss. Can you talk about your decision to share that very personable piece of of your lives?
Yes, it was. I can honestly say it was nothing I ever planned I would do, and nothing, like, even reflecting back, I'm still shocked that I did it. Up until that kind of exact moment in my life, I was a very guarded person. I didn't share anything vulnerable with the world, and I think that came from gymnastics. But we had kind of started sharing our lives on social media, and everything was edited and looked perfect. And I remember when we went through that, nobody knew. Nobody knew. My parents didn't know. It was something that really happened close to us. And I didn't know how to vocalize any of my emotions or feelings. I didn't even know how to communicate with Andrew, my husband. I didn't know how to tell him that I felt such a loss, even though I had only told him a week prior. Because I feel like for your spouse, a lot of times it can seem like not a big deal because it comes and goes so quickly. And I just didn't know how to like digest or process the weight of it. And we had obviously filmed it all because we film everything in our household. And it was for us. It was going to be a journal diary, a vlog diary that would stay for our family. And I just felt this call, this impulse to post it. Because in the back of my head, I was like, I wonder if there's anybody else out there who has gone through this. Because I truly felt like I was the only person. I felt like it was never talked about, especially in like biology class back in the day. I was like, I don't remember them ever telling you about this. And I remember posting it, not knowing what the response would be, but it just was a wave of women who were desperately writing to me as I was writing to them, saying, I thought I was the only person as well. It's good to know I'm not the only one. I feel like I have a family now. And I truly just sat there for hours and days and read people's comments and was able to heal through it and kind of learn from other people's stories how they healed and how they moved on. I heard that they had babies afterwards, and I was like, oh, maybe this means I can have a baby. I mean, even conversations I could have with my OB, there was something so real about seeing other people's stories that made me feel hopeful and kind of got me out of the low.
I think shared experiences are super important. I think it's also, from doing this for so long, so many women start blaming themselves, or want an answer about the why. So you can kind of package it up and put it on a shelf, and you've got it all kind of organized. That control of of all the answers, and to know the future is going to be okay. So that's why I think the shared experience, because there's so much that is we don't know. And that holding on to hope can be really difficult. So I think it was incredibly brave, Shawn. I mean, sort of that like total in awe of you in general, but to be able to emotionally share that, you have helped so many women. I sit in a room talking about it in a confidential way. So when so many people can share something so authentic as you have, I think it's really fantastic for women all women out there.
I was going to say, yeah, I remember
Great.
watching that video and tearing up and going, wow, someone that is just so well known had the same, has so many similar experiences. And yes, no doubt, as you said, you're helping so many. Can we talk about after that? Because a lot of people go through a loss and they don't talk about it because this is a very personal issue. What was yours? Now you're going through the thought of maybe trying to get pregnant again, but you just went through a miscarriage and that was your first experience. Talk about what it was like, the trying to get pregnant again and just in that time since from the miscarriage on.
I would say that was the hardest time since it was a surprise to us. We kind of had that fairy tale moment for a split second of what you see in movies of, oh my goodness, we're going to have a baby. And I think just reality set in really quickly. And I think starting our whole kid journey that way took a little bit of that spark away from us because even in talking about trying again, it was like, oh, well, how far will we make it this time? And will it be viable? And will we be able to get pregnant again? And it just was the first time we felt the doubt. But I think the hardest part for us was it was such an eye opening experience of as soon as I had that loss, I was ready to try again. I was like, my mom heart has changed. I want to be a mom. This is what I want to do. And I remember my husband was very hesitant going through such a loss and seeing me struggle. He was like, I think we should take some time and kind of work through this. And that was really difficult. So we kind of went through this motion of talking through things for a long time before we finally said, I think we're in a good place. And that was hard for both of us because I'd be ready and he wouldn't, and vice versa. But when we finally started trying, it was kind of like this, don't stress, take a step back, and we'll just see what happens. But I do remember when we got pregnant, that was scary because it was like every day you're just like, is this gonna Is it going to stay?
Yeah, and Dr. Cherot, I think you can probably add to that. Let's talk about you. You brought up a really good point, Shawn, with the spouses. I went through the same thing where my husband, after our loss, and the thought of ever, we were back to square one of, do we want to have children, more children, and that pre-pregnancy thoughts, and thinking, well, I don't know if I can mentally go through this, and having the support of your spouse and the open communication, because this is all part of the mental health discussion.
Yeah, I think it's an acute reaction to something like a loss can be really hard on relationships and put a huge stressor. Is what you're really shining a light on. And so taking the time to have those conversations, especially if you're at different ends of the decision-making process, diving in versus taking a pause or time. And I think that conflict certainly comes can come to a head. And I also think that it's getting to a place of really a lot of vulnerability in a relationship to talk about what that future looks like. Because you could be, on different sides, you could be both aligned, but it's processing the loss is certainly important. And that hope. And then what it's going to be like moving forward for the next pregnancy, and how that is going to be incredibly stressful and anxiety provoking for both of you, and how much physically one goes through changes versus one supporting the other, and huge stresses on relationships. Seen all of that happen all the way from conception all the way through to delivery. You can see that. So, and even postpartum, let me put it that way too. So I think it's really important to process and make sure that that relationship is strong moving forward, but also that the alignment is there. And some of that, having a pause to go through it, John, I give you kudos for that too, of sort of saying, I know that this is what I want to do, but making sure that physically and emotionally you're ready, but also with your relationship. It's important.
And there are a lot of resources out there, including March of Dimes, for those help. I went the therapy route for me, and that was a big help for me. And it was just myself, not my spouse, just myself. And that was kind of what helped me. It was for me, it was right after we became pregnant again. It was after our loss, the in between, to kind of just validate my feelings. And I think that when you're in a better space, headspace, you have this thought of getting pregnant, when you're younger, and maybe not realizing all that goes, into it once you have the baby, and the stress and how much your life changes. So to be in the right headspace, it means a lot as you get ready to get pregnant. I want to talk about a little bit about the medical conditions, because I know that there are some, preconditions, things, diabetes. What are some of the things, Dr. Cherot, that people might be watching, wondering, well, I have this health condition. Am I going to be able to get pregnant?
Yeah, I would absolutely see diabetes is super important to be in really good control ahead of time. That's when you really want to get to your physician, look at what your hemoglobin A1C is, which is sort of your average, looking at how your sugar has been under control over the last 3 months. What medications you're on is really important to get to also. And also talking about conceiving ahead of time and what that will do to change that particular condition. I'll tell you, diabetes, we want a much stricter control while pregnant. And that would impact baby's outcome. So super important to understand it, but also just to realize there's a lot of support we can do ahead of time. The same with hypertension. There are certain medications one should be on and one should not be on. And there are things that we want in good control, as we know that it's it could set you up for success, but also to know that your pregnancy will be followed differently. Same thing in diabetes. And then I think about family, conditions that may be something that genetically want to talk about, but also other conditions that you may think, asthma, for instance. Some asthma will stay nicely controlled in a pregnancy, and then others will have, a bad asthma attack from one pregnancy to another. Same patient could be really, really different. So you want to review your history, review your medication, and really talk about sort of socially consumption of alcohol, consumption of other substances as well, and really want to get on a program to make sure that all of those are have been looked at and discussed with the provider.
Yeah, that's great advice. Shawn, did you do anything differently? I mean, was there anything you ate or exercise or something that worked for you?
I don't know what worked. I feel like anymore, if it works out, you're just kind of
Yeah.
like, okay, I'll do the same thing. Like I said, I tried to hone in nutrition. I tried to be really just aware of vitamins, but I think going back to what Dr. Cherot was saying is that was my story when I was born. My mom had severe gestational diabetes that they couldn't get under control. I was severely preemie. I was a NICU baby. I had the APGAR score of 0. They weren't sure what my outcome was going to be. There was a lot of things. And I think going into our pregnancies, though, I had so many conversations with our OB of just, this is what happened to my mom. Do I need to be aware of any of these? And we monitored things really closely, but I was able to control a lot of it, which was great.
That's good. And you're one of the March of Dimes babies. You've
Yes.
been involved with the organization for a long time.
My mom said March of Dimes changed her life and changed my life and gave her such support through that whole process that I remember when I had the opportunity to work with March of Dimes, it was a no-brainer. I don't know if I'd be here without them. So
Oh,
That's amazing.
yeah, that's fantastic. Appreciate that, Shawn. That's a nice shout out. And yeah, you truly were and are a March of Dimes baby, full circle. I love
yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Well, any other information you want to give someone that might be watching, Dr. Cherot? One last piece of advice to get pregnant.
Yeah, I would definitely go to the March of Dimes website. That would be probably the first thing. And then I would absolutely say reach out to your provider before you conceive, or if you're early conception, get to your provider as soon as you can to have those conversations.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to leave it with you, Shawn. You have 2 beautiful kids. You are hilarious with your videos. Sum up motherhood for us. I assume
Oh,
all is great and then some.
it is a wild, wild ride. I never know if I'm doing the right thing. I don't know if I am, acing the job, but they are my life and it's the greatest blessing I've ever been given. So
All right. Well,
I'm just
Shawn,
always tired.
that's a given for
Yeah.
sure. Well, Shawn Johnson East and Dr. Elizabeth Cherot, thank you so much. You both are helping so many people, hopefully getting pregnant soon.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning in for this first of a 3-part series focusing on putting moms first. You can join us for the next one that's coming up on May 25th when we tackle being pregnant. And then on June 8th, we're going to be talking about post-pregnancy. And for more information and other resources, head over to itstartswithmom.org.